Throughout the 1980s and 90s, the allegations against Ian Henderson's feared Bahraini security services were monitored by international human rights organisations.
Redress has a mandate specifically to look into acts of torture and to assist victims of torture in obtaining reparation. Redress was approached by Bahraini victims on this matter, and we chose to look into it. The allegations against Ian Henderson are extremely serious in that during the time where he was head of the SIS, it is alleged that serious and continued acts of torture were perpetrated on a regular basis. As the commander or the person responsible of this unit, Mr. Henderson would be responsible under law for any acts which occurred within this jurisdiction.
During the 90s, when torture, particularly during 94 and 98, was systematic in the country, we were able to document most of the allegations of torture. And during that period, there were also at least 7 people that died under interrogation in custody of the intelligence services. So throughout this period, Ian Henderson was at the head of the intelligence services.
The international justice community has been aware of these allegations for at least 10 years. We know that in '95, the European Parliament made a very specific statement in respect of this case, asking that Mr. Henderson be forced to leave Bahrain at that time.
The United Kingdom has very clear legal obligations under international law with regard to torture. In this respect, the most important obligation is to ensure that your own nationals that are accused of having been involved in torture are brought to justice in your own courts. Most important treaty in this regard is the UN Convention Against Torture, which provides for alleged torturer anywhere in the world to be brought to justice regardless of where they committed their crime, of their nationality or the nationality of the victim. Both the United Kingdom and Bahrain are state parties to this treaty.
Yet, despite such obligations and despite knowledge of Ian Henderson's whereabouts, no steps have been taken to detain or question the man whose name many Bahrainis believe has become synonymous with evil. To his enemies, this address on Dartmoor has been a closely kept secret. Villagers, too, have learned little about their very private neighbour who plays no part in the close-knit local community. Yet the Home Office and the police have known who lives behind these gates for years. For the last 30 years, Ian Henderson has been free to come and go as he pleases. Year by year, his house at Holne has been improved, expanded, enlarged. Today, Stoke Shallows is administered by Harbin Securities, a faceless offshore company registered in the Virgin Islands. Neither the house nor Ian Henderson himself is on the local electoral register. Yet, while he may adopt a low profile, the gravity of the allegations against him ensure that interest in his past and his future is unlikely to diminish.
We have legislation on our statute book criminalising acts of torture wherever they may be committed in the world. We're signatories of the Convention Against Torture, and therefore we're obliged to apprehend people who commit torture when they step onto our soil and come within our jurisdiction. And so what we ought to be doing is to collect the evidence, submit it to the Crown Prosecution Service, and if they say there's a case to bring in court, then the Attorney General would give consent to the prosecution, and when Mr. Henderson sets foot in this country, which he does from time to time because he has an estate in the West Country, he should be arrested and brought before the courts.
All of which begs that single question: why does Ian Henderson, alleged torturer, appear to enjoy immunity from British prosecution? The answer perhaps may not lie with Ian Henderson at all. For 40 years, Britain and her American ally have befriended the Bahraini government, and not just with words.
Bahrain is strategically very important to the West. It's positioned in the Gulf region, which is of the highest strategic importance given its domination of the oil industry and the threat from instability in the region. Although Bahrain's not a major oil producer itself, it is the banking and insurance hub for the region. More importantly, though, Bahrain hosts the US Navy's Fifth Fleet, which is crucial for American strategic interests in the Gulf.
It's not just strategically important, but also is a key customer for Western hardware, particularly American military hardware, such as F-16 jets, Apache helicopters, etc. Bahrain has been one of the few places in the Middle East that have been able to keep a toehold through instances like keeping leverage over the internal state security systems, or through perpetuating arms sales, even after British control of Bahrain ended in 1971.
Britain sold a large number of arms to Bahrain at that time that were used for internal repression, and Britain is also a major investor in Bahrain and in the financial services industry in Bahrain, and I can only conclude that there were double standards in operation. We were very concerned about human rights in many countries of the world, except where there was a big British commercial influence.
Repression served the interests of Western companies and of Western interests as perceived by the American and British governments. American and British governments have allied themselves quite consistently with repressive regimes. The Western democracies which advocated human rights and were in many ways promoting forms of government that are far from democratic. So to that sense, it is, to that extent, it is ironic, but this was the way of the period.
Down the long years since independence, despite all the allegations of torture and abuse, Britain has remained a close friend and staunch ally of the Bahraini regime. Foreign Office Minister Jeremy Hanley wrote,
"Bahrain is a good friend and ally whose stability is a matter of great concern to us. We stay in close touch with the Bahraini authorities and offer them help and advice in a wide range of areas."
That letter was dated April 1996. Since then, little seems to have changed. British strategic interests, it appears, remain paramount. We asked the Foreign Office to explain why it was that Ian Henderson had not been called to answer his accusers. They declined to take part in this programme. While local MPs have taken little interest in the alleged torturer with a home in the West Country, others at Westminster have been vocal in pressing for Ian Henderson's prosecution.
Henderson might have walked from the fevered pages of a Graham Greene novel. He is known in the Gulf as the Butcher of Bahrain. He is the head of the security services and director of intelligence. And he has gathered around him the kind of British dogs of war, mercenaries, whose guns and electric shock equipment are for hire to anyone who will pay the price. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I believe we as a people have a clear duty to repudiate the conduct of one of our citizens in the service of a foreign power who stands condemned of crimes against humanity.
I think it's very shaming for Britain. I mean, during the time when Mr. Henderson was active, we were constantly asked about his status there as a British citizen, how Britain came to allow him to undertake these repugnant duties in Bahrain, and whether there was no influence that Britain could bring to bear on the government of Bahrain to have him removed from that post. But of course, the reply that we always used to get was that we had nothing to do with him. Although he was a British citizen, he was employed by another government, and we had no say either in the appointment or in the performance of his duties.
And it is inexplicable to me that no action has been taken during that period. Plenty of evidence is available, plenty of witnesses are available, many people are prepared to come forward and testify. Action should be taken.
I draw the conclusion that Britain and the United States have a set of standards which vary according to the nature of their relationship with a particular country. And I'm sorry to have to say that, because I believe that human rights should be looked at in an absolute way. We shouldn't pull our punches.
Meanwhile, Ian Henderson's home, here on the edge of Dartmoor, remains a very British retreat from the heat.
Do I get the police? What? What are you doing?
My name's Graham Smith from
I don't care who you are.
Carlton Television.
You just can't go around doing this. I'll get the police in a minute. Hang on.
OK. I've come to see Mr. Henderson.
You? Are you anything to do with Carlton? Turn that off, please.
Well, I've just had a 10-15 minute conversation with the couple who look after this house for Mr. Henderson. They confirm that he does own this property, but he's currently in Bahrain, although he was here as recently as 3 weeks ago. A point which seems to be confirmed by this letter, which we've received from a post office box in Bahrain. It's from Ian Henderson. He says, "Any claim that torture or inhuman treatment was ever carried out, condoned or permitted by me is totally untrue and entirely false. I must make it clear that I am not prepared to contribute to any programme or production on the subject." 2 years ago, the then Home Secretary Jack Straw ordered a police inquiry into allegations against Ian Henderson. Today, that inquiry appears no nearer resolution. The police investigation, we're told, is continuing. In his letter declining to take part in this programme, Ian Henderson invited us to bring any evidence we may have collected to the notice of the appropriate authorities, in this case the Metropolitan Police, and through them here to the offices of the Crown Prosecution Service. We intend to do just that. The irony is that most of the evidence is almost certainly in there already.
I feel that those guards are machines. They can't feel. Because when they bring us, they keep on saying jokes. When they beat us, they laugh. I don't feel that they are human at all.
There's another special report next Wednesday at 10:50. A new series profiling the work of a regional emergency team begins on Friday at 10:30.